to Kate Makes Things. I'm Kate and I am a non-wool knitter and crocheter, and this podcast is about my experiences working with non-wool yarns. So welcome and thanks so much for being here. Happy spring, or happy almost spring. We are so close to being out of the winter doldrums, which I'm so excited about, hence the daisies and the green and gold. I felt like I needed to be fully springified to film today. But yeah, I'm so glad you're here. This should be a pretty quick one. I've had a lot of stuff going on in life, so I haven't had as much time to work on things. And I have had a lot of stuff. I've done some traveling, and I don't tend to work on things as much when I travel. So not as many things finished or started today as sometimes are. But yeah, let's get going. So I only have one finished object, but it is the object that I have been working so hard to finish, and that has been a pain in the butt every single bit of this process. Let me start by saying there are no problems with the pattern. Chantal from Knititude writes great patterns. I highly recommend them. So there is absolutely no problem with the pattern. All of the problems that I ran into were problems that I created for myself by doing all sorts of different modifications. So let's talk about my Syngoniums. Before I show it to you, I gotta tell you a little story. So if you've been watching, you know that I was in a yarn chicken battle for this sweater, and I did thankfully win the Battle of Yarn Chicken and got all of the lace rounds in, and so I'm feeling really good about that. But once it was finished and all the ends were weaved in, this thing almost brought me to tears. So, if I can retell the story, it's very dramatic. Just kidding. So I put it in a little bath to wash it and get it wet so I could wet block. I pulled it out, did the whole towel trick where you stand on it and all that, and I took it upstairs, laid everything out on our guest bed, because that is the perfect place to block, and started pinning, and I looked and I was like, oh my God, this looks awful. And so I called my husband up and I said, okay, look at this. And he was like, oh, it looks great. Oh no. If you remember, I was going to run out of yarn. And so my lovely friend Laura gave me an extra skein of this yarn, the circular bamboo, that she had bought at the same time at the same store that I had bought mine. And because we bought it at the same time, at the same place, I didn't think about checking the dye lot. And guess what? 2 different dye lots. And I didn't realize it until I had washed the sweater and laid it out. So all the ends were woven in and everything was done. It was just needed to be pinned so that lace opened up really beautifully. And it was so easy to see where one yarn ended and the other began. Oh, I will put a picture here of it when it was wet, because it was so glaringly obvious, the mistake that I had made. So the first thing that my husband asked me was like, well, what are you going to do? And I said, there's nothing I can do. Like, most of this yarn has already been frogged and reknitted twice, right? It cannot take another frogging. And I would have had to rip like all the way back in order to alternate skeins or do something like that. So I decided to let it dry and see what happened. It is not as obvious when it's dry. Here, I will finally show it to you now that the cliffhanger is out of the way. So here she is. All right, we've got our lovely lace at the bottom, our lovely 3/4 sleeves. So as you can tell, it's not as easy to see the separation when it's dry. If you look really closely, if I look really closely, I can tell. And so I've decided this morning I decided, I came up with the idea. If I wear it a few times and it still bothers me, I will use like a Rit dye and just dye the whole thing, because it's a nice light cream, right? That should be super easy to dye. Hopefully. But yeah. So that was the final straw, almost to tears. Oh, so close to tears, y'all. not even, oh, it has all worked out okay. I haven't worn it yet because I finished it, and since then it's been 60 and 70 degrees. So I'm hoping for like 1 or 2 more like 50-degree days that are like just chilly enough to wear a nice cotton bamboo sweater. But let me talk one more time and round up all of the different modifications. So the yarn was Circulo Bamboo. It's a bamboo, cotton, and acrylic blend. It's a really lovely yarn, a little bit splitty, but I find that most cotton yarns and bamboo yarns are a little splitty, so that's not as big a deal to me, and I think the stitch definition is still really wonderful. So I had to work at a smaller gauge to get a fabric that I liked with this yarn, and so I was working at a much larger size than is technically called for my bust size. So that was modification number 1. Modification number 2 was that I worked short rows around the neckline because I had made this sweater before and it tended to ride up a little bit more than I liked. So I decided to add some raglan short rows around the neckline so that the front set a little lower than the back. I had to redo all of the math for the sleeve decreases because I was working at a much larger size, and I used an online calculator to do that, and it worked wonderfully. And then I had to add length absolutely everywhere because I am a 6 foot tall Amazonian woman. I'm just very tall and everything is very long, and so I had to add like 2 inches to the sleeves and like another inch or 2 to the body. But I'm pleased with where everything ended up. All of my modifications worked, and it fits really well. So I just need weather that's cool enough to wear it and to not be bothered by the fact that there's 2 different dye lots in there. One other thing that I found worked really well with this yarn, when I was weaving in ends, the first couple of ends, I just wove in like the whole end together all at once. And it was a little easier to see where I had woven in those ends. So after the first couple, I started like splitting the yarn into 2, and that just made it really easy to blend into the stockinette when I was weaving in the rest of those ends. So it took a little bit longer, but unpopular opinion, I don't actually mind weaving in ends. I would rather weave in ends than gauge swatch. I will still do both, but that's my personal opinion. But yeah, so that is my finished Syngonium sweater. After all of that trouble, she is done. She looks fine. She would be much more beautiful if I wasn't distracted by the different yarns, but yeah, she's done. So that's all I can ask for right now, right? So let's talk about works in progress. So I kind of have 2 works in progress. One is my Rosewater shawl. I started this on a international trip last summer. I think it is a great travel project. It is Sweet Georgia yarn. Sweet Georgia Flaxen Silk Fine is the yarn. So it's a blend of linen and silk. Got it at a yarn store in Chicago. But you'll see it's got, hold it down, there we go. So this is the top of the shawl. It's got a nice like garter stitch section and then a giant lace section. And I am just continuing to work the lace until I run out of yarn, because what am I gonna do with this much linen silk fingering? Nothing. So I am working on it. I'm just continuing the lace repeats until I am out of yarn. But let me be honest, this is the most laissez-faire I could possibly be with lace. It is all of the lace rows are super simple, and it's only a one-sided lace, so that's, for the most part, it's only a one-sided lace, which is really nice. But yeah, if I get to the end of a row and I'm like, oh, I don't have enough stitches, well, let me just add an extra yarn over. Or if I forget what row I'm on, I just kind of make it up. And I think, here, let me spread out at least one section. And I think it's working out fine. I think we're doing okay. I also figure, like, how often am I going to lay it out so that you see all of the lace all at once? Never. Right? Even if I, like, drape it over my shoulders, you're never going to see all of the lace all at once. And so it doesn't really matter if it's perfect. It just needs to look breezy and airy and open. So I'm being super lazy with this lace. I keep losing track of my row. I keep realizing that I don't have enough stitches and just being like, whatever, I'll just add another one. But it's a really great pattern for that. So if you have never done lace before, I recommend this shawl so that you can get a nice basis in some lace work without actually having to work super hard or care a whole lot about it. So yeah, it's my Rosewater shawl. She's really great for a little bit more mindless stuff. So has gotten some work done during like Zoom meetings and things. So my only other work in progress is swatching to figure out what garment I want to make next. I have this yarn from LaRue Cotton. It is her bamboo linen blend, and it is a light fingering. I think it might be like slightly more lace weight. It is super, super lightweight. And so I have been doing a million swatches to figure out what I want to make with this, and trying to be better about figuring out a fabric that I like and then finding a project that matches that gauge in that fabric rather than trying to match the yarn based on just weight. Because I also find that with non-wool yarns, there's more variety in like a single weight of yarn. Right? So a cotton worsted, I usually end up working up at like a DK weight because I don't think that it's really a worsted weight. I don't like the fabric that it makes at a worsted weight. So trying to do the swatching and then find a pattern based on the gauge that I'm getting and that I like. So I've done like 4 different cage swatches for this one. Yeah, 4 different cage swatches. So I started out with a size 4 needle, realized that it was too airy for what I had in mind for this yarn. And so I stopped that one pretty quickly, went down to a size 3, was also kind of frustrated with how airy that was. So then I thought, well, what if I held 2 together, because I have a million swatches. I have a million skeins of this, but 6. I have 6. I have like 2,400 yards of this yarn. So I could easily hold it together and make whatever I wanted. So I did start a swatch where I was holding 2 together, and I like it fine. It's still a little airy because my experience with bamboo and linens is that they tend to grow, if anything, when you block them rather than tighten up. So I'd rather start with something that seems a little tight, but then it blooms a little bit, gets a little bit softer and drapier when you wash it. So I still could do it held, 2 pieces of the yarn held together, and I think it would be fine. But then I was like, well, what if I don't want to hold it together? Because then that'll be really thick, and I like lighter weight things, especially for spring and summer in Tennessee. So I was like, well, what if I crocheted with it? And so I've got a crochet swatch here where I did 1 size hook and then a smaller size hook. But I don't think I enjoy crocheting with such lightweight yarn. I think I would much rather knit with a lighter weight yarn, even though it's going to take me longer than if I crocheted with it. And I think that's part of why the Hazel Tank took me so long. Because it was a super lightweight yarn, and I don't enjoy crocheting as much with those lighter weights as I do knitting with them. And so then my last thing was, okay, let me go down to a size 2. I don't have size 2 needles in my interchangeable set, which is why I did everything else before I went down to the size 2. because I'd have to figure out how to do a garment top down or bottom up without interchangeables, and I've never done that because I'm bougie. I like the two a lot better. It's a much tighter weave, but I still think it has plenty of drape. I need to do a couple more inches on this swatch before I decide exactly what it's going to become, and maybe wash it, but I think the twos might be my happy place for this. So then I just have to find something that I can do with this teeny tiny little gauge. Probably going to be like 30 stitches per 4 inches. It is going to be small, but it's okay because it'll be a perfect summer weight, spring weight, summer weight for me. So, working on those swatches. Hopefully by next time I will have finished a swatch and will have actually started something with this. But this is LaRue cotton, and it's she did a Disney villain series a few years back, and this is the Evil Queen colorway, which Evil Queen is my favorite villain other than Maleficent, and I love this purple because look, it's so pretty. So yeah, excited to work with that. So last thing to talk about is acquisitions. So on my last episode, somebody commented and asked for a recommendation for a non-wool sock yarn to make summer socks. And if you have been paying attention for a bit, you will know that I have never finished a pair of socks. I have unsuccessfully started the same pair of socks 4 times, and they're still languishing somewhere. So I thought, you know what? Let me buy the yarn that I recommended, and I will try it out. So I have a set, also from LaRue Cotton, of her vegan sock yarn. I got the Heartbreak set because it's like a kind of a red brown. I thought it would be a nice sock there. But her vegan sock is 40% tencel, 40% cotton, and 20% elastic. And as far as I can tell from indie dyers anyways, that tends to be pretty common, that breakdown of the fibers in the yarn for a vegan sock yarn. So you get, the softness and the drape of a tencel, you get the durability of a cotton, and then the elastic gives it the stretch that you need for it to be a sock. And you can see in the yarn that the elastic doesn't dye quite like the tencel and the cotton do, and so you always are going to have kind of a little tweedy effect, which I think is really cool for a sock. So again, these will hopefully be started really soon, and I will have tried a vegan sock yarn for y'all, and we'll have a review for it. Will also be my first hopefully finished sock. So lots of new things in my horizon. So there's my LaRue sock yarn. So that's all I've got. A project that is finished but almost brought me to tears. Some really easy works in progress and exciting for me acquisitions, so that hopefully I can let y'all know my thoughts on the vegan sock yarns of the world. I hope you are having a wonderful spring. I hope you are making some beautiful t-shirts and tank tops and lovely spring and summer items, and lightweight shawls to take to the beach. But yeah, all of those gorgeous summer and spring and summer items that are perfect for us non-wool knitters. And I hope you will join me in a couple weeks and see what I've decided to make with some of these yarns. Thanks so much.